Senator Blunt. In the 2020 presidential election in the state of Nebraska, we saw an excellent job done in administrating the vote, and we had record turnout. We saw over 960,000 people vote out of 1.26 million registered voters. And I am so proud of the job that Nebraska has done. And as I sit here today and I listen to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and the witnesses that they brought forward, as well as my colleagues on my side of the aisle and the witnesses that we have brought forward, it sounds like states are doing a great job. We hear that there's very little or no voter fraud. We hear that the voter turnout was tremendous in this last election, which all of us want to see. We want people to exercise their right to vote. We want that to happen. So I would just ask for us to think about why in the world would we give up state control of our elections to the federal government? Most everybody in here is saying in their own fashion that our elections are working. Yet we're saying, oh, you know, my heavens, we have to have the federal government take over control. I vehemently disagree with that. And as I look through this bill, my staff worked overtime trying to get through the 800-some pages, but what we saw were proposals that I think are done in a political fashion. What we've seen is a lot of confusion in this bill. In some cases, I would say sloppiness in how this bill was written. Senator Merkley brought up one point about that states have to purchase the paper-backed voting machines that are compliant with new standards, and I believe you, Secretary Warner, you also spoke to that. We have conflicting deadlines in this bill that we discovered. In one section it says this has to happen by January 2022, and another it conflicts with that. I see chaos. I see chaos in trying to meet these requirements for a 2022 election. For example, these machines don't even exist yet. So you tell me how we're going to get this implemented. You tell my elected officials in Nebraska, our Secretary of State and his very competent staff, how we're going to be able to meet all this. And I would imagine before we're through here, we're going to find a lot more. And as Senator Wicker pointed out, when the American people hear what's in this, they do not support it. We all want fair elections. We all want more citizens to vote. That's what keeps a democracy strong. But to try and portray this as something it isn't is just pretty darn disingenuous. Secretary Warner, I would ask you, in your written testimony, you identify the unrealistic deadlines that I mentioned that we see in S1, and it makes it difficult for states to meet that. Can you speak to some of the challenges, for example, to when we look at the decertification of millions of dollars worth of equipment that I mentioned? Can you quickly, well, I've used a lot of time already, but can you speak to that, and then I will have a number of written questions to you, because these, sure, we can't just sit here on both sides and speak in grandiose terms. We need to get down to the nuts and bolts in this and figure out what's going to happen and if it's even realistic, sir.
Thank you, Senator, and I think you've articulated the sentiment, especially of the people of West Virginia, with the problems with this bill. On the equipment itself, It's just, since it doesn't exist, you have to go through that process of the vendors actually developing that. And they say it's anywhere between 12 and 36 months. So that would shoot way past even the January 2022 timeframe. Then there's the whole process of acquiring that equipment. Then there's the training the clerks, and then the clerks training the poll workers on that. It's just unrealistic, and that's one of the major concerns that our clerks have expressed to us.
Yeah, I saw much of this when I was in the Nebraska legislature. I chaired the Transportation Telecommunications Committee. We had to implement Real ID. Nebraska was one of the first states to be able to get that done. It takes time. It takes time to do the Help America Vote Act is when that came out. It takes resources. So when we're looking at a complete federal takeover of the election system of the United States of America, we need to understand what's fully involved here. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.